And goodbye, boss. Amon is so back, though. Oh my god. Welcome back, everyone, to another Borderlands 4 build video. And today, Raging Inferno got fixed. And now Amon is cooking. So, you know we had to make a build. Let's dive right into it. We're going to start in the skill tree here. We got 25 points in the green tree and 24 into the red tree. Starting at the top, we have 5 points into cast iron for forge skill, cooldown rate, and gun handling. This is going to be really nice to spam our forge skill. And we're also going to put 5 points into executioner for critical hit damage. Because Raging Inferno is based on critical hits, dealing more critical hit damage will allow us to have higher damage with Raging Inferno, allowing those dots to deal more damage. And then we have 5 points into Destruction Engine for Forge Skill damage and detonation damage, because the Forge Skill seems to be the best way to get the highest dots. So pairing this with Raging Inferno, and Raging Inferno actually works with our Forge Skills, so they have a chance to crit. And when they do, they deal some ridiculous dots. For our augment, we're going to take Blade Tempest here because this allows us to build the most amount of stacks with Prime. If you have 3 charges, you can guarantee yourself 10 stacks of Prime on an enemy, which is the highest amount. And then when you deal that detonation is going to deal a ridiculous amount of damage, allowing your Raging Inferno dot to deal even more damage. We're also going to put 5 points into Raging Inferno, obviously, and I have 5 more points from my class mod. Now, if you have a class mod with 5 points, this is the best setup for the build, because having 10 points to give us 120% burn damage per second is just going to be absolutely absurd. You do so much damage with it. We're also going to put 3 points into Wild Heart for increased status effect damage and hazard damage. We want those status effect damage to increase our dot damage. We're also going to put 2 points into Freezer Burn. Dealing gun damage with cryo increases incendiary damage for a duration, and dealing incendiary damage with guns increases cryo damage for a duration. If you have a Rainbow Vomit with cryo and incin, as well as shock, then that would be the best 3 pairing for a Rainbow Vomit to utilize along this build, which is one of the guns that we're going to be using. And then for our capstone, we're going to take Conflangerang here. So it causes our forge skill to deal incendiary damage in both directions and leave a trail of fire as it travels. Having it deal incendiary damage on the way out is really important for the detonation damage to allow us to have more dots. I haven't tried any of the other capstones with it, but Conflangerang having the incin in both directions is really helpful for this build. Moving to the red tree, we're going to put 5 points into Discombobulate for melee critical hit chance to allow our action skills to have more chance to crit, because our forged swords deal melee damage. Next, we're going to put 5 points into Wield the Storm for increased status effect damage and duration, so our dots deal more damage and last longer. And then finally, we're going to put 5 points into Tritanium Knuckles for melee and skill damage increase, which will again boost our damage for our skills, so that final dot deals the most amount of damage. Moving down to the right tree, we're going to put 5 points into Catastrophe. Whenever Amon applies shock, he gains critical hit chance for a duration. This is why you want to have shock on a Rainbow Vomit or a shock grenade, so we can increase our critical hit chance. And then if your Rainbow Vomit has incin, burning applies to an enemy, increasing our critical hit damage. So these two pair really nicely together with this build. Then we're going to put 1 point into Fist of Stone. Whenever you deal melee damage, you restore a % of Forge Skill cooldown. This is really nice to just get your Forge Skill back a little bit faster. And then we're going to put 3 points into Crackling Aegis. Amon gains increased status effect damage and ordnance damage based on his shields. The fuller his shield, the greater the effect. One thing to note with Conflangerang, when you cause a detonation or damage an enemy with it, you restore Forge Skill cooldown. So if you hit multiple enemies, you're going to get your Forge Skill back a lot faster, on top of all of the ways that we have to get our Forge Skill cooldown lower anyway. So now let's move into the weapons. You can see I have 4 shotguns, and they're all Jacobs. So I have the Hot Slugger it's just nice for mobbing, as well as Hellwalker for mobbing. And then I have 2 different Rainbow Vomits. I have one with Cryo, Incin, and Shock, like I said earlier. And then I have one with Corrosive Cryo and Shock. The Corrosive one is for enemies with armor, and then this one is for any other type of enemy. For our gear, starting in the rep kit, we're going to have a triple bypass. The ideal one would to be have one with Hard Hitter to increase our melee damage by 50%. I have this one with Enrage because before this recent patch, Enrage was the most amount of damage you can get. But now that we have 50% damage dealt with Hard Hitter, having a triple bypass with Hard Hitter on it is going to be better. And I also mistakenly put Googe because I didn't know firmware was going to get buffed either. So a Hard Hitter with Action Fist combo on a triple bypass is going to be the best setup for this. For the ordnance, I'm using Waterfall. You could also use Slippy to get your forge skill back faster, but I'm using the Waterfall with Shock on it so I can activate some skills so we have our crit chance as high as humanly possible when we activate our swords and our forge skill to deal the most amount of damage. The class mod which allows us to get +5 into Raging Inferno is the Furnace. This drops from Idolator Saul. I farmed him for a ridiculously long time for this specific class mod. This one allows your build to go to the next level. It's still good without +5 into Raging Inferno, but with +5 into Raging Inferno, it just takes his build to a new level. For the shield, I'm using Watts for Dinner with Siphon on it because I want to have overshield as much as possible so I can keep my shields up to the highest level so our status effect damage deals the most amount of damage. Plus, we get 25% shock damage on top of it when we have an OS. And then for your enhancement, because I'm using all Jacobs, run a Jacobs enhancement. And if you can get one with critical hit chance on your guns as well as status effect damage for a shotgun, that would be best to pair with a rainbow. For the firmware here, 2 points into Action Fist for melee damage increased by 25% and then action skill damage increased by 30%. 2 points into Real Big Fist for 50% more melee damage increase, and then 1 point into Googe for some action skill cooldown rate. Now, finally, for the specializations here, we're going to put 10 points into Brute and 10 points into Sharpshooter so we can unlock Killer, which will then allow us to get Contamination. We're also going to put 20 points into Runner as well as 20 points into Daredevil. Obviously, I'm 1 point away from getting Daredevil, but the main one you want is a Honed Mind. Action skills gain a chance to critically hit enemies and also gain increased action skill critical hit damage. The chance is 5%, but the damage is 50. Both of these are going to pair really nicely into this build. The last ones you're going to want is Now with Caffeine, as well as Groundbreaker. Now, Groundbreaker did just get nerfed, so you don't have to use Groundbreaker if you don't want to. You can pair it with something else in the killer tree, but the main ones that you want is Contamination, Now with Caffeine, and a Honed Mind. All right, so now I'm going to show you how I go about setting up my damage for a boss. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop my rep kit, throw grenade, shoot a couple shots, and then throw my swords and then my forge skill. You can see we're ticking for 790,000 damage per tick before it drops down. This can just absolutely eviscerate a ton of bosses in the game with this build. So it's a little bit of a setup, but man, did this buff and fix to Raging Inferno make Amon juiced. And this build also does decently well in mobbing. It's definitely not as good as some builds could be for mobbing, but this build really excels in the bossing. So again, all you do, pop your rep kit, throw a grenade, shoot a couple shots of Rainbow Vomit, spam your swords into the boss, and then throw your forge skill. And you can see the damage just ramps up. And as long as you have high crit chance, you're going to be dealing ridiculous amounts of damage. It can change though because it is a crit chance. So take that as you will, but it's still an incredible build, and I'm so glad Raging Inferno got fixed to make this build excel. But that's gonna do it for the build. I hope you guys enjoy. Hope you guys like the build. If you do, leave a comment down below. Let me know how you've been using the build, how you're enjoying it, and if you have any other builds you want me to try out. If you guys want to come hang out with us while we test these builds, we stream on Twitch, twitch.tv/Walzer with 2 R's, and then make sure to also go follow me on TikTok and Instagram as well. Hopefully we see you guys in chat and on other platforms one day. Thank you again for making it to the end of the video. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.